Jade, and today I thought I'd do a really quick video covering my recovery plan. So what I did to move from being in a really bad place with my OCD suffering to today OCD playing a very small role in my life. So a really short video. I want to go through the top level points, share my schedule, what I did and how it all worked. The first thing to say is that step one was really learning about OCD and what it was, going from years and years of suffering where I was just terrified all the time, didn't understand what was going on in my head, to finding out I had OCD. That was the first step in that recovery plan. Once I learned the fact that I even had OCD, I was able to actually start learning about it. One thing that I do think we need to do as OCD sufferers is take recovery into our own hands. So I've always been the same, even when it came to things like having my babies, doing my work. I'm not the type of person who will sit back and have someone tell me this is how it's done, this is the best way to do something. I approached it the same with OCD recovery. I wanted to learn about OCD, how it operates, who are the experts out there in the world, who's going to provide me with answers to the things that just aren't stacking up, and make sure that the therapist or life coach I chose definitely lined up and made sense with where I was coming from, and it needed to make logical sense to me, that recovery process. So sometimes I think with OCD we can overthink about a therapist and what they're saying and worry and stress. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm more talking about, in a non-compulsive way, learning about OCD, how it operates, and taking it into your own hands, not just being led by lots of different people on what they think is the best way. Make sure that you really thoroughly interrogate any different solution provider or partner in terms of just making sure you understand why they're suggesting what they're suggesting. That was step one. One of the biggest things that went into my recovery plan was, and you can even write down just on a notepad, like my recovery plan. So I did do that a while ago, and the top one, which was one of the first and most basic ones that I was able to implement, was no avoidance. Okay, I will not avoid anymore to the best of my ability. So whatever I feel scared to do, and I'm not doing it because I'm scared, I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to start saying yes to things that my OCD is telling me to say no to. So sometimes, and you might relate to this, if we're asked to do something that we know deep down triggers our OCD, we'll think of a reason why we shouldn't go. Oh, well, the weather's not great today. That's not going to be, the best thing to do today. So just being super honest with myself was really helpful. Like, Jade, you are saying that you don't want to go because of OCD. That's why you're not going. Let's be honest about this. And that really helped take OCD's power away. And so once I flipped that on its head and decided to go, do you know what, when I feel that strong urge to not do something, I'm actually going to do it times 100. This is going to be the task. This is the work. So no avoidance in your recovery plan. Based on what I did, like, it worked really well for me. And obviously it's commonplace that not avoiding things is really good. Obviously, as I go through this plan and share my schedule as well of what I did and when and how frequent, like, you would need to consult with your therapist or life coach on a plan for yourself. This is just what I did. So no avoidance. Exposures played a much larger role in OCD recovery than I thought they would. I thought it'd be like, I'll do a few bits of homework and then I'd be done. And I often remember saying to my therapist and life coach, like, am I done now? Can I stop doing that exposure? And actually, if you're still concerned about having to do an exposure, you probably need to keep working at it because you're still scared of it. The point of exposure is to do it until you're no longer afraid. Now, I did practice exposures loads and didn't see much movement. Like, smaller themes started to disappear when I did exposure, ones that weren't as sticky for me. So if you don't have severe crippling OCD like I had, exposures and not avoiding anymore and facing your fears can be enough to get you to being really well. So, that wasn't far enough for me, but it can be game changing for a lot of people who just need to face the fears, break the cycle and get on with it. For me, there were also a couple of other things I did that are like standard practice in OCD recovery. It was working really hard not to ruminate and to leave the thoughts alone. In a few of my themes, that again has been enough. And there is often confusion, I think, or I was confused about, well, surely if I'm going to work, and I'll talk in a second about unconditional self and life acceptance and working towards rational thinking as being a missing piece in my stickier themes, I used to get really confused because I would think, well, hang on a minute, surely if the advice is to leave the thoughts alone, why am I then going into them with the unconditional self and life acceptance work? What I would say to that and what I've learned is that, say today, like a small theme tries to get in and doesn't have much luck, it just tries to get in and it's not sticky and it's not like persevering. It genuinely works to go with uncertainty and to leave the thoughts there. That definitely works in OCD. Where I used unconditional self and life acceptance, which is essentially assessing what is the core fear here that I'm feeling, what am I terrified of that's fueling this OCD cycle. Once I realised that exposures, leaving it there and going with uncertainty, no matter how much I did that, it wasn't working. For those much meatier topics and themes, I actually decided to work on the unconditional self and life acceptance because that started to unlock them at the root. So where before I was sort of working at surface level and where the themes were not deeply rooted, it was not a coincidence why those themes were so strong. I'd built up these irrational beliefs over the years about how utterly terrifying and terrible those scenarios would be. I did have to apply unconditional self and life acceptance alongside leaving it alone. So I think what I learned from this process and in my recovery plan, what I did is I did both. I did leave the thoughts alone. So when I would get an intrusive thought about my super scary theme, I would leave it alone. I would exit that conversation in my mind. I would get on with my day. I would let them do their thing. I would try not to ruminate. And at a neutral time, not when I was triggered, I would work on, disputing these irrational beliefs. So such as, why would it be so terrible if I was in prison for the rest of my life? Yes, I wouldn't want it, but why would that be the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of anything ever? And working on things like making peace with living in really, really difficult, scary situations and noticing and seeing that lots of people have done that. And I most likely could as well. So the Albert Ellis book, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, yes, anything, that's such a great read for this topic. If you'd like to learn more about unconditional self and life acceptance for the treatment and recovery of OCD, that's definitely one to read because it makes loads of sense about that topic, which is really, really chunky. So I think that's a really key point about my recovery plan. I wasn't doing unconditional self and life acceptance in the place of leaving the thoughts alone and going with uncertainty. Yes, I was making peace. I can never know if this is true. There is no point in ruminating. I'm not engaging with these thoughts, and I'm not engaging with these thoughts. Unconditional self and life acceptance and making peace with worst case scenario is not having a thought pop in and then neutralizing it with the idea that, oh, that wouldn't be so bad, because that's compulsive. What we want to be doing is, like I said, in a neutral place, work on those issues and at a deeper level uncover what is our core fear here without being compulsive or ruminative, just going, right, clearly I've got a fear of social rejection because it's latching to harm, it's latching to POCD, it's latching to my relationship. What is it that I'm really scared of here, and why would societal rejection be so bad? Yes, I don't want it, but why would it be so bad? I could still live, I could still survive. So that we can turn our feelings down from utter terror, which is the OCD loop, to, I really wouldn't want that, which is how a person without OCD reacts. So I kept in my recovery plan that my goal is to respond to my fears in the same way that a person without OCD would respond. So, that makes sense. We're not saying we want to be in prison. We're just saying, I'm not going to lay shaking in my bed for 15 hours a day watching Netflix, panicking that I'm going to prison. I'm just going to not want to go and recognize that it wouldn't be that great and let my brain skim over it a bit more. So those were the key components. Another key component was the last really key part for me in my recovery plan was a determination to take recovery into my own hands and to really make it happen. It can be really difficult to motivate ourselves and to feel like we've got it in us to do what needs to be done. I decided that I wanted my life to be my own again. And I think that is something that's not talked about often enough. It's like we can have this recovery plan, we can have all of the components that we need, but until we've decided I am just not living like this anymore, and I want my life back. I don't want to live by OCD's rules. I don't want to be told what I'm going to be doing by my own brain. I want to take charge again. And so whatever happens, whatever life throws at me, I'm living by my rules and not OCD's. And I think for me, by making that my central focus on my whole recovery journey, it just became easier to focus on that long-term recovery plan. It was like, this is what I'm going for. My aim is that OCD is not ruling my life anymore. And it kept me motivated. And I keep checking in and say, where do I want to be in 10 years? Do I want to be living exactly like this? Or do I want to be feeling free from OCD? And so in summary, today, OCD impacts my life in a really small way. It's not really part of my identity anymore. It's not something that I feel triggered if someone mentions OCD and I think, oh my gosh, I've got that. That's awful. I know that my brain still has it, because I can feel sometimes that it's got the potential to latch to things more strongly than someone who doesn't have it. But by going through my recovery plan, I was able to really turn down the high, terror responses that I had in relation to my fears. So in a nutshell, my recovery plan looked like, I would say, because my OCD was so extreme, for the first 6 months of really getting towards having a proper recovery plan that had all of the ingredients I've mentioned today, all of the necessary parts, I spent 6 months having like a weekly or every other week check-in with my life coach, Rob, who runs this whole thing. So that was every week or every 2 weeks, and it went down to every month, and then it was every 2 months, and then now I don't have any check-ins at all, other than maybe every 6 months or so if I've like had a particularly stressful time, or I've been really sleep deprived and my brain is going back into a bit of an irrational place. And so my exposure homework, or the plan I took from the therapy I'd previously had and moved into the future, my exposures would look like maybe two or three pieces of exposure homework a week. And then lack of avoidance meant that there was regular daily exposure as well. Because if I'd been avoiding certain things throughout the day, by doing those instead of avoiding them, that's like 2 or 3 exposures a day naturally without it being sort of formal. I also disputed my irrational beliefs for about 20 minutes every day or every other day. So, this is really like over a couple of months disputing irrational beliefs and really, really nailing that down as to like, why would that be so scary? And why is this such a terrifying thing in reality? Surely there's a way that I could see to live with this. And then building in the other things like understanding that thoughts are thoughts, leave them alone, don't engage with them, try and ruminate less. And so over time, it just started to like slowly unlock, and I'd have like aha moments where things would get better. And I'd be like, oh wow, like something just shifted. And I don't really know where that came from, but something shifted in me, and it's like everything feels lighter and brighter. And that just carried on happening. I had a lot of setbacks. That's normal as well. And that's a really easy time to pack in and just not focus on recovery anymore. But I just 100% recommend keeping going and trusting in yourself. And that full circles back to the first point I ever made, which was own your recovery journey. Don't just take the advice from anybody who seems to put out good content, like question it. Even like this channel, everything I'm told, I think, does that line up with what I'm thinking? Yeah, that sounds about right. What concerns I have with that? Yeah, that seems to make sense. I get that. Whereas in the past, other things, just thinking, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't seem to connect with that. And I've tried that and it hasn't worked. So whoever you're going to use and work with, as long as you feel super confident in the approach and there's no unanswered questions about, hang on a minute, that just doesn't make sense at all, that's what matters. And that for me has been so game changing in my recovery journey. It's like taking it on myself to learn and understand it. Sadly, there are many, many, many therapists, life coaches who do not understand OCD at all and will tell us things that come from a well-meaning place but don't necessarily help with severe OCD. So we do kind of have to have a knowledge on it. And yeah, that's my best advice. In terms of recovery plan, it does need to be set out specific to you and what you're going through and what you're dealing with. So my battery died on me just then, so that's why it's cut out, but all the best. Any questions you have, please comment them below this video and I will address them specifically to you. And make sure you subscribe to the channel for regular updates as well. Have a great day.